You and I both know the script. I'm going to be better this time. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to finally get it together. And then life happens. Stress happens. A busy week happens. And the plan you were proud of becomes something that you avoid. Here's the part we don't like to admit. We lie. And by the way, if discipline actually worked, I would have perfect posture, an empty inbox, and never forget to drink water. Clearly, that is not the world we live in. We lie to ourselves every day, sometimes willingly, sometimes because it feels safer than telling the truth. But who are we fooling? Not the Joneses, not our families, not our coworkers. We're only fooling ourselves. Here's the truth. If discipline worked, you wouldn't still be starting over. So today, I want to give you a different explanation. One that doesn't require you to hate yourself first. I'm Didine Erskine, CFP, and this is Planning with Purpose. Today, we're going to talk about why discipline isn't the answer and what to build instead. So far in this series, we've talked about checklists, growing the pile of money, intention, and why planning is not a January activity. We're going to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable because I don't think your problem is discipline anymore. And if I'm right, that changes everything. And it means you can finally stop blaming yourself. We've been taught that if our finances feel messy, the problem must be us. So we say things like, I just need to be more disciplined. I know what I should be doing, I just don't do it. I keep messing this up. But pause for a second and listen to the word itself. Discipline means training yourself to obey rules or a code of behavior. In other words, it assumes that the problem is your character. So discipline quietly becomes the moral explanation for financial success or failure. But if discipline actually worked, no one would still be stuck. No one would still be starting over every January. No one would be hiding their statement. No one would be promising themselves that this time will be different. Discipline is not a system. Motivation is not a strategy. And shame is not a plan. Here's the harder truth. You are not failing at money. You are succeeding at the systems you accidentally built. And that system was shaped by things you never consciously chose. Your biases, your fear of being wrong, the people you listen to, the people you compare yourself to, your discomfort with change, your need to feel in control, your avoidance when something feels heavy. We do not make financial decisions in a vacuum. We carry stories with us, family patterns, messages about money, experiences that taught us what is safe and what is dangerous. And then there's this one, our deep resistance to paying for guidance. We will spend hours researching online, scrolling, listening to podcasts, taking advice from strangers, telling ourselves that it is being responsible. But we hesitate to invest in clarity because letting someone else see our financial life feels like giving up control. And free advice feels safer than being wrong in front of another human being. And then we wonder why logic alone never works. You are constantly surrounded by signals that distort reality. Social media highlight reels, friends who only share wins, articles screaming that everyone else is doing it better. So you quietly start measuring yourself against a version of life that does not exist. And when your life does not look like that, something inside you whispers, you are behind. You are not enough. You should have figured this out by now. That voice is not discipline. It is fear wearing a productivity mask. Now let me tell you what this looks like in real life. People sit across from me and say, my colleague is getting 20% returns every year. It's flexible, no fees, and I feel like I should be doing whatever they're doing. And you know what I notice in these situations every time they come up? Their friend never tells you about the panic, the second guessing, the stomach drop when the market fell apart. They don't mention living through the fastest interest rate hiking cycle in modern history. Bank failures that reminded everyone that safe does not mean invisible. Tariff wars and trade policy swings that rattled global markets, the invasion of Ukraine and the shockwave it sent through energy prices, gas pipelines being damaged, and the reminder that geopolitics can move markets faster than earnings ever will. Inflation roaring back after years of being almost invisible. Bond portfolios having one of their worst years in decades. They don't talk about how they questioned everything. They only talk about the number they ended up with. And you hear the surface story and think, why doesn't my life look like that? Because you are comparing your real life to someone else's edited highlight reel. What you are chasing isn't performance. It is the fantasy of certainty. There is survivorship bias at work here, mixed with overconfidence. You only hear from the winners who are still standing, not the people who quietly gave up. So you end up chasing a magical unicorn that does not exist and calling it a strategy. But it isn't strategy. It's comparison dressed up as confidence. And if you just exhaled a little bit when I said that, good. That tells me this isn't theory. It's your life. Here's another layer no one talks about. Planning threatens control, because planning means admitting that something about your current life is not working. It means hearing feedback you may not like, seeing numbers you have been avoiding, letting go of familiar habits, even if they're hurting you. So instead of changing the system, we protect it, we defend it, we rationalize it, we stay loyal to it, not because it's good, but because it's familiar. I see this play out even in families. People will tell me they are the exception, that the rules of planning do not apply to them, that a few hours online gave them all the answers they needed, that they have it all figured out. They say this not because they lack intelligence, but because information feels like control, and control feels safer than vulnerability. So we cling to what we found ourselves, not because it's better, because it keeps us from having to admit that we might need help. That is not confidence. That is fear trying to stay in charge. When someone challenges our financial decisions, it feels personal, not because money is math, but because money is identity. Our choices become proof of who we think we are. So when someone suggests a change, what we hear is not advice. We hear judgment, and then the walls go up. This is why getting a second opinion is so hard. It usually goes one of two ways. Sometimes the fear is internal. You hear something that contradicts what you've been doing, and you think, what if I've been doing it wrong all along? And sometimes the fear is external. There are professionals who know how uncomfortable that moment is, and they lean into it. They may unintentionally amplify that discomfort. They frame everything as broken. They imply that you have failed. They turn uncertainty into urgency. And that combination of internal doubt and external pressure keeps people frozen. Because changing your system feels risky. But being told your system is wrong feels even worse. So what do most people do? Most people do nothing. They stay where they are. Not because it is ideal, but because it's familiar. Here's the truth that changes everything. People do not rise to the level of their goals. They fall to the level of their systems. If your paycheck never touches your savings, you are not disciplined. You are living inside a system that makes savings optional. If your spending surprises you, you are not reckless. You are operating without visibility. If you drift every year, it is not because you forgot. It is because your system never reminded you. This is the environment we create. There is a reason why nature versus nurture has been studied for generations. Not because one is right and the other is wrong, but because both are always at work. You are shaped by what you build, who you surround yourself with, what you allow into your day. So that belief that says, what's the point? Everything is broken anyways, is flawed, because we are not powerless. If you cultivate chaos, there will be chaos. If you cultivate urgency, there will always be urgency. If you cultivate clarity, something different becomes possible. Not because you became stronger, but because the environment changed. Several years ago, back when I was still cool, I didn't have kids, I did CrossFit. I even competed a few times. On the surface, it looked like discipline. I showed up to the gym almost every day. You would assume that meant I was in incredible shape. And let me tell you something. There is no better feeling than lifting a bar over your head that you never imagined you could lift. And then letting it go at the top and hearing all of that weight crash into the mat. For a moment, you feel unstoppable. Ironically, I was in an incredible shape. I wasn't unhealthy, but for my frame, I carried a few extra pounds. I didn't track my nutrition the way that I should have. And I absolutely told myself that I deserved dessert more than once a week. Every January, the gym would explode. New members everywhere. Resolution energy everywhere. People determined that this was their year. And as a regular, it annoyed me. The place was packed, and I had to show up early just to claim a spot on the floor. And then something predictable happened. By March, they were gone. The gym was back to normal. My CrossFit sessions went back to being pumping. It wasn't until writing this episode that I finally understood something. What kept me coming back was not discipline. It was the relationships. It was the people who noticed when I didn't show up. The conversations between workouts. The accountability they grew without anyone calling it that. One of my closest friendships today started in that gym. We didn't build it over willpower. We built it on environment. Most people think they have a plan. What they usually have is a list, a budget, a few goals, maybe a spreadsheet or an app. But a plan is not a collection of tasks. A plan is the outcome you want to move towards. A strategy is how your system supports that outcome when life gets loud. The plan is the destination. The strategy is the structure that keeps you moving when motivation disappears. If your plan only works when you feel disciplined, you don't really have a strategy. You have hope, and hope is not a system. Every financial outcome is built on invisible architecture, where money flows automatically, where it gets stuck, where it leaks, where it hides from you. It's not about trying harder. It's about designing better. That is why foundational work matters so much. That is why this series exists. We have to understand ourselves before we decide what to do with our money, because every structure that lasts starts below the surface. Think about the great works of ancient civilizations. The Colosseum, the pyramids of Giza, and the Pantheon in Rome, whose concrete dome has stood for nearly 2,000 years without modern reinforcement. We are still in awe of them thousands of years later, not just because they were decorated beautifully, but because their foundations were engineered with intention. Did you know that recent discoveries show that what we see on the surface is only a fraction of what was built? The real strength lives underground. Your finances are the same. If you only decorate the surface and ignore the foundation, nothing holds. But when the foundation is designed with care, the structure can outlive the chaos around it. I don't raise my boys by hoping they remember to do the right thing when they're tired. I design routines that make the right behavior easier than the wrong one. Money works the same way. Am I always the fun mom? No. Am I always the bad guy? Also no. But one day, those baby birds are going to leave the nest. And my job is not just to make sure they are kind people who can take care of themselves emotionally. It is to make sure they are financially stable enough that they don't have to move back in with me. Because a solid foundation is not about control. It's about freedom. Before the next episode, I want you to notice something. Not change it, not fix it, just notice it. Pick one place in your financial life where you rely entirely on memory and motivation. It might be savings, it might be tracking your spending, it might be opening statements. Ask yourself this one question. Where am I depending on discipline to do the job of design? There is no right answer. There's no homework to turn in, just awareness. Because you cannot redesign what you have never observed. Over the next episodes, we're going to stop talking about discipline. We're going to talk about design, visibility, feedback loops, behavior guardrails, and why automation without awareness is actually dangerous. Because the goal is not to become a different person. It is to explore systems designed more thoughtfully to support the person you already are. You are not broken. The system you are living inside is not failing. It is performing exactly as it was designed to do. Your life is already designed, whether you realize it or not. The only question left is this: what's it designed for? Nothing in this episode requires you to fix anything. It only asks you to notice what you've been carrying. You can find this and other episodes in our foundational series on YouTube. Thank you for listening to Planning with Purpose. This is Didine Erskine. Remember to plan with purpose and grow with grace. Goodbye.